Hello all and welcome to the TFF podcast by Fantasy Football Hub, our fourth episode of the 2021 season as we talk all things Telegraph fantasy football. My name is Andrew and I'm joined as usual by two superb Telegraph fantasy managers. Firstly, Luke Wilson. Happy New Year, Luke. How's it going?
Yeah, no, pretty good, mate. Yeah, I'm a bit ravaged by my budget defence with injuries and things, so not quite stuck to my transfer plans. But no, I'm pretty happy with where I am. Well set up going into the fun season now. So yeah, all good.
It is the fun season. It's been very kind of, it's hard to keep the discipline in the first half of the season. Our advice is always in it, keep your transfers back, play it safe, play it boring. But this is the time now where actually you can actually look at the fixtures and think, oh my goodness, you can really target them. So I cannot wait to get into it. And a very happy new year to the Hub's resident statistician, Carl Weeks. Welcome, Carl. Still rising up the ranks. Every time I look up, you go further away from me.
Happy New Year to you, Andrew. I may be going further away from you, but that's because I'm losing a bit of luggage off my spare transfers.
Okay.
So they're delayed and probably propelling me. But you're definitely right in what you sort of said earlier. We are into the fun season, and all the good boys and girls have plenty of transfers to have their fun. And those who've been a bit naughty will have to make do with the leftovers.
Exactly. We will get into it now in lots and lots of detail. So for our YouTube watchers, if you haven't subscribed to us yet, please press the subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen to ensure you don't miss anything. Also, please press the like button if you enjoy our content. So for this podcast, we will take a look at our teams and our progress. We will have a look at what the data is telling us and pull out the headlines, followed by trying to work out where our next move should be for the coming weeks as we approach the halfway point of the season and the FA Cup kicks in. We will answer some Twitter and WhatsApp questions, share our plans for the coming weeks, and finally take a look at the top of the Fantasy Football Hub members' £200 prize mini league. So postponements, guys. This is the first thing, and Telegraph is so hard. It's obviously the same in FPL, same in Sky, and same for all the games, but it's absolute carnage. And I suppose initially, Luke, if I come to you first, kind of what are your real first initial thoughts on how to manage with all the postponements going on in terms of planning and transfers?
I'm glad I've got a few transfers in the bank that I can take advantage of. So, I think my team's set up to be able to rotate the expensive boys in midfield and up top, and that's how I'm planning to deal with it. So if any of my budget defenders are out, I don't really care because they'll get games later on.
Okay.
If any of the big boys are out, then I can take advantage of minimum 2-1, if not 3s, 4s, possibly 5s. I think if Villa's game gets redone, there could be some real games there. So for me, not because of COVID, but my plan was always to attack the January onwards season with, rotating those heavy hitting guys. And I think I'm going to stick to that. So I'm quite glad that I've still got some transfers in the bank. I have just checked, and my second team is only about 5 points behind, and it's got 6 more transfers. I just shows if you just leave it, pick a half decent team at the start, and just leave it, which is all I've done with that one. It's happened last year as well.
I remember the chap. I think who won it last year. Actually, the chap who won it last year, he packed one of his teams full of Man City and Liverpool players and didn't touch his. He didn't even look at it until I think it was the end of November, start of December, and obviously City and Liverpool had a really good start last year. It's only then he kind of picked his team up. He was in a 2,000 rank overall with 40 transfers in hand. And, you're just absolutely laughing at that point, aren't you? But what are your thoughts, Carl, on how best to kind of navigate? I think for me this year, I've changed approach with how I generally use my transfers, which I'll talk about when we look at our teams. I've been kind of looking at a period of time now rather than looking at specific kind of game days. What is your kind of approach been, and and how do you think we're going to manage the chaos going forward?
A tricky season because as well as COVID, there's been it's been crammed in. There's been a lot of injuries and a bit of rotation. So I've used quite a few transfers because I brought in players and then they've ended up being injured or a few issues like that. But in terms of postponements, it's just a nightmare. And you just, to me, just ride with it. It's like, so Villa, it's an interesting one because I was hoping and expecting them to go through in the cup. I was a bit surprised Liverpool put out such a strong team.
Yeah, I was as well.
You know, you need to be aware of them, and especially expecting that they'll have rearranged games sometimes in the future. So Villa got a tough run coming up. They're now at the cup, so you may wish to sort of drop a few now, but they become actually options later on during the season because they've got those rearranged games. So it will be actually more helpful later on in the season because you'll know which budget ones you may wish to go to and get 3-4 extra games out of them.
Just to touch on Villa, so apparently because Villa and Newcastle have both been knocked out of the FA Cup, and they have an outstanding fixture, the one that was postponed a couple of weeks ago, it would make sense for that Villa and Newcastle postponed game to now go into FA Cup 4th round week. So this is why we need to keep on our toes, because these things get, these news can drop at any time.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if that Spurs game goes ahead, because the precedence in the league is people with less players out have had the game called off. Man City, I'm not quite sure how they got away with that, but there's talk of them having triple fixtures in next week.
It is.
But
go on, sorry, Carl.
Well, I was going to sort of say teams like Newcastle, Villa, even though theoretically it's possible to go in on the 4th rain day, I would imagine there's no reason it can't go in midweek later on in the season because neither of them are in Europe.
Yeah,
and and they may wish to have crowds back unless there's any reason for TVs. So it's a possibility. But I just ignore it, and if it ends up being later in the season, it will just help me navigate or give me options of other players. If they bring it forward, then it's like it never happened, and therefore it'll be what it'll be.
Yeah, I'm actually in a way it actually is quite nice because it's forcing me to not plan way too far in the future, which with Telegraph and Sky I normally do that, and you just can't. Like I've got a vague idea of where I'm going to go with the players, but I mean, I guess the other thing to add to that point, Carl, is if they're playing teams that are in Europe, then they can't. So we've got that. So I think what we might find is some of the fixtures get mixed up a bit, because I think with the Euros, I think there's absolutely zero desire to postpone that again, from what I can understand. And so I think we may have some really weird and wonderful fixture changes coming up, which is going to be quite interesting. So, yeah, unprecedented, isn't it? But
well, that's right, because you've got no crowds. And I heard someone say, and whether it's an option or not, if Spurs get called off against Villa, could they put in the Spurs Fulham game?
Yeah.
And that's probably a bit more practical because Spurs have still got the same cup competitions and in Europe, and that they've got less midweeks, and therefore you could sort of see that actually occurring. Whereas Newcastle, Villa, because they could be slotted in anywhere, and it'd be quite nice to have it in front of a crowd and get a bit of extra money in. It may happen, but Ben Crellin and the likes of that are the people to sort of like monitor. But I'm just less worried, and to be honest, considering the way the world is, I'm enjoying fantasy football, but it's helping me just get through the world we live in at the moment. So
I completely agree.
Just enjoy each game as it goes, and not overly worry about some things.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Just as a shout out on that side, it's just nice to have a distraction. So I think we're us lot who are addicted to these various games. I think, well, we're not all addicted. I certainly am, but it's just nice to have that mental break from thinking, "Oh, what if?" And so it's good. But I wish some of the footballers would behave a bit better. I have to say, there's a few of them are very naughty, but there we go.
A naughty boys. I think the only thing it's going to impact, I think, in terms of the way I'm going to approach the game. So I mentioned earlier, I'm looking at games in kind of blocks now, and I'll use an example. Like, I would guess we're all going to talk about Man City's upcoming run for over the next month, which is obviously absolutely supreme, right? But I'm kind of looking at that as a block of fixtures. I'm not really looking at it in terms of game days as such. And then my kind of broader thought there, if Spurs and Villa are very likely to have a very congested period either next month or the month after, whenever it is. So I think just in terms of my approach to the way I'm playing, I think this month for me is target Man City due to the quality and quantity of fixtures, and then kind of later down the line I'm going to be looking at maybe targeting Spurs and Villa a bit more when we get to that period. But that's the only kind of mindset change I've had. I think trying to plan day to day at the moment is just impossible, because it's like teams, like whole training grounds are getting shut down. It's not even like just an odd player. It's like it was Villa last week, it was Newcastle a couple of weeks ago, it was the whole of Man City couldn't train and they missed a game and things. So yeah. Anyway, let's have a look at your team. So I've got your team firstly, Carl, up on screen. If you wouldn't mind just reading through your team as it stands at the moment for our podcast listeners, and giving us your rank and thoughts on how you're doing.
I haven't actually got it in front of me.
Okay, shall I tell you what it is?
Yeah, if you like.
You've got Meslier in goals. You've got Justin, who had a nice haul this afternoon in the FA Cup. Zuma and Bednarek at the back. You've got Salah, Fernandes, Rashford and Grealish in midfield. And then you've got Carver Lewin, Ollie, Watkins and Bamford up front. And your rank was 1936, but that was before today's games. So I'm assuming with Justin's 12-point haul today, you've probably jumped up to around about 1,500, I would guess.
Yeah, I had somebody else who played it. Rashford's come on, so he's picked me up another point.
Oh, good stuff.
So, in terms of my team, I've like I sort of said on the site itself, it shows a few of the transfers. Bednarek has been quite a good one in since he's at Southampton, and he picked me up a couple of clean sheets. I'm quite content with the team. I haven't made a transfer for a few weeks, so I've got quite a bit of money in the bank, and a lot of it was going to be how am I going to handle this period that we're sort of talking now? Because my normal plan is, well, I'm a bit, my normal plan is to start making transfers coming up through the FA Cup, which I'm sure we sort of talk a bit later on. But yeah, I'm content with the team. I'm down to 22 transfers. That's the only disappointing thing. I'd like another 6. Well, I'd like another 14 to be honest, but another 6 would be, I'd be in a much happier place, as it were.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And just moving then on to Luke's team. Luke, do you want to read us through your team and your thoughts?
Yes, I've had to do a fair few transfers that weren't planned because of various people getting in. So my budget defence is now looking a bit more beefed up, to be fair. But I'm quite happy with all bar one. But so I've got Martinez in goal, who's going nowhere because he's cheap. And yeah, arguably one of the best in the league. So I'm fine with that. I think Villa are undervalued in the game. I've got Justin, so that's nice. Got some points there. Yeah. Got Zuma, very good price at 2.9. And then I've got I've got Balbuena in there, but I'm considering shifting him. But I'll wait because he's been out for illness more than anything else, I think. So he's a good price if he plays. So he may move. But then I've got Diaz and Cancelo. So I've got 5 at the back, which is always the aim. Yeah. Once I'd identified who were going to be the good priced budget people. So I've got a bit of money in the bank as well. So I can go Balbuena, I think, up to 2.8. So there's a few options there. And then, yeah, my front 5 are Salah, Fernandes, Grealish, De Bruyne and Kane. So I wouldn't mind swapping Kane for Bamford and potentially upgrading. I think then I could go Balbuena back to Son. But I've got the highest price player in midfield and up front, so I can basically jump to any forward, which is always the plan. So I'm a little bit worried that Carl's he's not that actually used as many tries. I thought he'd have got down into the teens from the way he was talking. So I've got to 26. I was sitting nicely on 29, but I've had to use 3 because of injury, which was a real shame. But yeah, my only move planned really is probably Salah to potentially Aguero if he plays in the cup, and I'm hoping he does. I may move to the others, but I don't really fancy any of the other midfielders for City, to be honest, because they won't play all the games.
And what's your rank at the moment, Luke?
About 10k. I was up to 5k before the injuries, but I think it's only about 25 points difference. So I'm fine with it. I mean, I'm going up and down every week. Because basically, if my heavy hitters I go up about 5k. If they don't, then I drop about 5k. So fine with that.
Cool. Okay. And just a quick look at my team then. So I've got Meslier in goals, who's actually picked up a couple of clean sheets recently.
Every time. I'm so glad you didn't take that bet.
I don't know.
Justin was Lamptey was one of my injuries. And that bet you would have cleaned up on that.
Would have. I don't know how he's kept them, mine, because their defence, like they kept back-to-back clean sheets against Burnley and West Brom, but how I don't know, because both teams should definitely have scored. But he's in there. Cheapest player of the game, well, one of the cheapest players in the game, so I'm quite happy to have him in. I've held on to Tierney all this time, and he has got 32 points in his last 3 games, and he's looking good moving forward as well. So I'm so glad I held on to him, because he was awful, and I was thinking of taking him out, and then obviously I think he had a clean sheet just before Christmas, or just after Christmas, and then he had that 18 point or 17 point absolute haul, and another 10 today in the FA Cup as well. So he's kept me afloat. Actually, I've got Reguilon, who was actually doing well for me. He was keeping a lot of clean sheets up until Spurs have had their their little blip. I've got Zuma, and I brought in Andy Robertson a couple of weeks ago, just before Christmas. It was got me a few points. So at the moment I'm 4 at the back. I've then got Bruno Fernandes, Heung-min Son, and Mo Salah in midfield, and I've got Ollie, Watkins, Bamford, and I put Che Adams in, which I'm so disappointed that obviously he was brought off early, because he was injured. He missed the last game through concussion, and then their FA Cup game got postponed, so not the best with him. But I have got some big plans, which we'll talk about after, about a complete transformation of my team to take us into January.
My just a quick observation. I'm genuinely surprised that both of you are playing with 3 strikers, given all our discussions on value, and it's never up front. So I'm really, they're all good value for the position, but yeah, I mean, I'm quite interested into why.
Well, I'll be moving whole hog the other way. So, but we'll talk about that later. But it's. For me now, it's transformation time. It's the time where you make your moves now, and I'll certainly be making a big move, which we'll talk about as we go through. And my rank. So I've checked. So after Tierney's clean sheet and assist earlier, I think I'm roughly about 5.5k. I've got 23 transfers left, which is not fantastic. But from where I was a couple of months ago, when I was having a complete meltdown, I'd used 9 or 10 transfers and was ranked about wherever it was, 30 or 40k. I think to come out of this period at 5.5k with 23 transfers, and in a really good, I think it's a really good plan. I'm kind of happy with, actually. So really hoping to push on now, up into the top 1 or 2k in the next month or so. But we'll see. So firstly, we have one of Carl's data slides, which is the top point scorers so far in TFF this season. Just to briefly run through the top 3 or 4 and each. So the top scoring keeper is Martinez of Villa at 3.3 million. He's obviously had a really good season. Leno, surprisingly maybe, is then tied with Edison and Lloris. They're all on 57 points. McCarthy on 56, Mendy on 51, and bear in mind Mendy didn't start playing until a a fair few games of the season, even though the kind of wheels come off a bit there. Defenders, Bednarak is the top scoring defender in the game, which surprised me. I must say, he's not even someone I'd considered. But 2.6 million, 73 points. I mean, he's been an absolute snip. Obviously, Carl, you've spotted that early and jumped on it early, but what a spot that was. Creswell at 3 million for West Ham is on 72 points, which again really surprised me actually in terms of, I didn't realise he was that high. They've overtaken Zuma, who was in third, Chilwell in fourth, Robertson, Walker-Peters having an outstanding season, 66 points. And then in midfield, unsurprisingly, Mohamed Salah is the top scoring midfielder with 108 points. Heung-min Son second, 107. Bruno Fernandes third, 105th. Grealish, then Zaha, then Rashford. And then the striker spots, Harry Kane, top scoring striker, 114 points. Jamie Vardy, 106. Patrick Bamford, what a snip he has been this season. Just at 4.2 million, has returned 98 points. Calvert Lewin, then Callum Wilson, and Ollie Watkins has, he's done the business. Had his triple assist the other week, which was very welcome. But so they're the top point scorers. Luke, any thoughts there?
I think it's an interesting one as well. So there's a few players I like. So Martinez, top scorer, and has got games in hand on a lot of people really as well. So bearing in mind he hasn't played as many games. Yep. Creswell for the defenders is probably the one that I'd really like as my fifth, but I can't afford him. So I may look at Bednarak. But I like Creswell because he's now on, I think, pretty much all of the set pieces. And he's from what I've seen, and I may be wrong on this, but what I saw in the highlights is he's moved more to that left wing back than that left centre back, which is also opens up more crosses and opportunity. So I think actually Creswell will probably push on further. I think one name you didn't mention who's coming to fruition because of the Jimenez injury is Neto at Wolves, 3.2 million. I think he's fantastic value at that price. And so he's another one that, even though Wolves aren't the Wolves of last season at 3.2 and effectively playing as either the first or the 9 or 10, depending on which day it is, really like, but I think I was looking at, we were talking about the Bamford versus Kane for my one up top, and I sold Son, and I'm kind of wishing that I'd sold Kane now and got Bamford because he's just so good. He's so
volume of shots with Bamford. That's the reason I brought him in. If you shoot that much, even if he scores a goal every other game at that price, it's incredible value in it.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, it's good compared to last season. Though I think what's brilliant is there's so many options.
It's incredible.
If you take all three of our teams, they're all really different, and the last few years,
in terms of
points. 7 or 8 players overlapping. I think on the last 2 seasons we've been doing this every week, isn't it? We talk and so it's very interesting. What about you, Carl?
Well, when Andrew sort of said a good spot about Bednarak for myself, there's always what I'd call being lucky and unlucky. And sometimes you may be a bit unlucky, but become lucky because I was bringing in Vestergaard was my plan, but he happened to be injured. So I wanted a Southampton defender to sort of hit that price point, and hence that's how he's ended up in my team rather than any genius from my part. When I look at the slide that we have in front of us, there are some very good picks in there, and you picked out most of them. But I want to touch on Meslier of Leeds, because when I watch him, he looks like some schoolboy they've just stuck in goal because they're one short, and he's always going to concede goals. He doesn't look like a proper goalkeeper. And every time Leeds concede 4 goals, I'm sitting at home cursing Andrew.
-1, another -1.
Yeah, well, -1 I'll be happy with. It's a minus. But when you look at the slide, and one of the the key metrics I look at is the very final column, which is points per pound per game. And I think he's second or third on that list. So even though he's like down on 12th, his value metric is 1.18. And he's only beaten by Martinez of Villa. So he is actually good. I was thinking, I'm going to have to get rid, and the FA Cup's going to be a good time to go. But if he starts in the FA Cup, I'll be quite happy to keep him because he's really good value for money. Once you take that into account,
I think with the keeper spot for me, it's a bit of a, I wouldn't say a dead spot, but definitely in the first half of the season where there's less clean sheets. I would personally just go for the cheapest play-in player you can. The difference with defenders is defenders can get attacking points, whereas keepers obviously never, very, very rarely can, but players like Justin, just as an example, Tierney, even Lamptey, these kind of wing-back players, I think they tempt us in because they've always got that threat of attacking returns, whereas with a keeper, I just think just chucking the cheapest one. I do, however, think in the second half of the season, teams tend to tighten up. So the better teams who are going for, the kind of league and Champions League spots tend to, go 1-0 up or 2-0 up and then kind of shut off shop and make sure of the 3 points. And I think the relegation threatened teams play for 0-0s or play to win 1-0. So I do think that in the second half of the season, there's probably better options. But I didn't buy Meslier at the start for anything other than that he was a guaranteed cheapest player in the game, which would enable me to pump my money elsewhere.
Yeah.
Just to jump in on that. Just purely because I did a huge article on this a few years back. It's all got screwed up last year, but all about big at the back. But I'd just be wary of that hypothesis because historically it's the last sort of 10 games where they tighten up. It's the time now is where teams score the most goals. So I wouldn't be shift. I mean, not everybody's going to keep clean sheets. Yeah, there's going to be a few teams that will. I mean, Liverpool, I thought were going to tighten up. They're not, but I think. But I wouldn't be changing. Would be my advice. I think it's still a case of stick. But when you get to that running and the teams that are in the hunt for staying up or in the hunt for winning it, get one of them. And I don't think Meslier will be in either of those groups. I don't actually think Martinez will, but that's the point where I may look to invest in an Edison or a Mendy or an Alisson or something like that. Yeah. But I would say leave it. But the whole COVID thing changes everything. So I'd go with your gut, probably. But
and I suppose just observation and a final point on the top point scorers is the keepers and defenders, the teams who are up the top there in terms of the top points scored, very, very few of them are high value players. So the highest value, in the keepers, Edison is all right. He's joint second. Pope is down in 7th place. Alisson, he's been injured obviously, but he's down in 9th place. In defenders, you've got to go down to 4th to get Chilwell at 4.2, Robertson at 5.1. You've then got to go down. So in that whole list of 20 players, they are the only 2 players who cost above 4 million in that whole 20. Now that's just in terms of like an observation. So obviously there's been a lot of and I think you guys probably touching it more than me at the start of the season. A lot of really good value in defence. Conversely, if you look at midfield and attack, all the heavy hitters are all at the top of both lists. Your, Salah, Sons, Brunos, Harry Kanes, Vardys. You get the odd bargain players like maybe Grealish and Bamford and Carver Lewin. But for me, the trend has been that the premium attackers have been doing really, really well, and the premium defenders and keepers haven't been doing as well in the first half of the season.
Yeah, what's really interesting, I'm intrigued on your thoughts on this, Carl, particularly, but my recollection of previous seasons, and I haven't got the data in front of me, is that at this point in the season, normally you would see one or two of the better known defenders, so a Robbo or a TAA or someone like that, being not quite keeping up with the top scoring strikers or midfielders, but being very close. And I think it's really telling that Robertson, I think we're probably the only expensive striker in that top 20, is on 69 points. Normal seasons, I reckon if you saw him on 99 points, you wouldn't bat an eyelid. And I think that's the thing, is that actually they're so, all those big hitting defenders are so far off the pace. I mean, I got really annoyed the other day when Hudson-Odoi scored that 93rd minute goal. Double, well, in every format, I've got double City defence. Yeah. I was like, oh, I'll take a gun to my head. It's the first time this season it's actually affected my mood. But yeah, it's mostly with a bet with someone. But yeah, it's but that was very annoying. But yeah, I'm a bit surprised, and I think there's always this return to the I guess to the mean. And I think come end of the season, you will see a few more expensive strikers in that top 10, let alone the top 5 list. And at the moment, there's only one over 5 million.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, Carl, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're right. There's been a lot less clean sheets from Man City and Liverpool, and particularly Liverpool, where you've had the Van Dijk, who, well, injuries for Liverpool defence, but Van Dijk would get a few goals, and they've had lots of clean sheets, lots of assists by TAA and Robinson. With the clean sheets, they would be much higher. Man City, they've always sort of tended to let in a few goals, but Liverpool used to be really good value for money over the last seasons, and you would expect to see them in the top slots, and they were actually, because they were cheaper, they were actually top of the value for money charts as well, by far. And when they were both going neck and neck, they were keeping clean sheets week in, week out. Yeah, they fly. But they just haven't. It just, whether it's COVID and empty stadiums, I don't know.
Just a touch. Apologies, Carl. Sorry.
No, you may touch on it on the next slide, but it's prevalent to this one, I suppose, as well. Is this slide is only based on people have had to play a minimum of 8 matches, which doesn't actually make that much difference to your total point score. But when you start looking at the metric of points per game per pound, you've got players like John Stones who are cheap and should be coming on people's radars if you think he's going to hold his spot going forward.
You agree, he is definitely on my radar. So this next slide is my favorite one every time of the whole podcast, and it's points per million. And there's some names, especially in midfield. The names in midfield really surprised me, actually. But we'll start at the keepers. So the top points per million scoring keepers, Martinez is still top. Meslier jumps up to second there. We then got McCarthy, and then Leno and Fabianski. Darlow in at 2.6 as well, is quite cheap. Defenders then, Bednarek, Zuma, Creswell, Ogbonna, Walker-Peters, Target, Vestergaard, who are all 3 million or under, as we kind of mentioned earlier. The top points per million scoring midfielder, and this surprised me, in the whole game, is Neto. So at 3.2 million, Neto is the best value midfielder in the whole game in terms of points against price. Soucek is second, which again really surprised me. I know he's been scoring odd goal. Third, Jack Harrison for Leeds, because he's so cheap at 3.2. Fourth, Matthias Klick, who I had in for a lot of the season actually, is fourth. And then you get down to your Son, Grealish, and Bruno's, etc. But though that first four really surprised me. Neto, Soucek, Harrison, and Klick, you know. And then we go up to the strikers. No surprise to see Bamford top of the shop, and indeed, so he's got a point per million value of 23.3. Che Adams in second, who I jumped on a few games ago, and he haven't managed to place in, which is disappointing. But at 3.5 million, I mean, what a price for someone who plays up front for a really good team. Carver Lewin is third. Then you've got Kane, obviously, because he scored so many points. Callum Wilson and Ollie Watkins before you move down. But some names there. Luke, what are your thoughts on those names?
I'm reassured to see some of them. I think my rank doesn't vindicate it, but I look at this, and if I think the way I'm looking at this now is, right, your keeper, there's a choice of two, right? That's it. If you're choosing any other keeper, you've got it wrong right now, in my opinion. Your defenders, I'm just scrolling down that list. So of the top 19 are all under 3 million.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So you could pick any. And I've just got it. My tactic was right in that I picked 4 of them. I just seem to have picked all the 4 that have got trucked. Otherwise, it'd be laughing here.
Callum and all that lot, wouldn't
it? But yeah, then. So Neto, interesting thing on Neto is most of his points have come recently, as have Souček.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so they've not got loads of points, but they're really in form. I mean, I'd be looking at Neto. I wouldn't be touching Harrison or Klitsch. I think Klitsch has lost pens as well to Bamford from what I've seen. Yeah. So he had some pens early season. But then, so at 5, 6, 7 and 10 or 11, you've got Grealish, Fernandes, Son, Salah, which... the fact that those big hitters are in the top 10 for value as well as overall points, it's about your 50 million, not your value. And then when you look to the forwards, you've got some good value people there, but you've got Kane at 4th, most valuable player, and he's probably the 4th, 5th most expensive player in the game. And you've got Vardy at 7 or 8, probably 2nd most expensive player in the game. So I think, for me, this kind of vindicates the view of you can go budget at the back. You just need good players that are the picks, but it's still spending your 50 million budget. So yes, I would argue Bamford, but I would still argue you need Son, Grealish, Fernandes, Salah, others. KDB will be flying up that list in current form because at come end of the season, they'll be there for value in the top 10, but they're also they'll probably have double the points of Neto and Souček. So it's about the most points. So maximize your defenders, I think. Get those sub 3s and you're laughing. But again, looking at your 3 teams, you've got it nailed with those budget strikers. So and you're both ahead of me. So maybe I've got it completely wrong.
It's finding the balance, and it's obviously getting on those players at the time. You mentioned there about form as well. Form is so important, right? Carl, what are your kind of observations of this?
Yeah, but very similar to Luke's. So I would sort of say there's 3 options for keepers looking at that table, because one thing that we have to bear in mind is the number of games people have played. And some teams have played 1 or 2 games less than everybody else, such as Man City and Man United, some of their players. And the Chelsea keeper I would put in that bracket. And I'd put him above Martinez as somebody to have, especially since their values very similar. And it depends on if Mendy plays in the cup, but having those extra games going in the cup may sort of swing it in that favour. But I'm just sort of saying that's an option.
Yeah. No, that's
and perfectly right. It's about if you've been fortunate enough to nail the 3 cheap ones. Or your defence, it just frees up all the cash to play up front. So because the defenders are so cheap, that is why you can have three people up front this year, rather because you haven't got the expensive defenders eating into your budget. And the midfielders, I think Neto is going to be a really good enabler, because Wolves got through in the cup. It may be, depending on their draw, it may be someone to sort of bring in to sort of free up a bit of budget.
Good job there, Carl. So your next slide we have up is the last slide where we're kind of looking back so far, but it's your performance outlier slide. What do you want to kind of shout out from this? Because I got to be honest, I'm not a data analyst. I can't really understand it. So what do you want to shout out from this?
Okay, so basically, you've just got the four positions.
Yeah.
To quickly describe it, and you've got all the data points of players, of how many points they score on average per match by their value, providing they've played 8 games. And what you're sort of trying to see here, it's very similar to the previous slide. It's about any players that sort of stick up. So on the goalkeepers, there is Mesler at the bottom, Martinez sticks out, and Mendy, again, the ones we mentioned before. The defenders, the what we call the line of best fit, basically sort of says the more how much additional money that you put in, how much better value you've got. The defenders, it's a bit random and the line's very flat, which just basically saying if you spend more money, you aren't getting any more output. And that's very similar conclusions that we've had before.
Yeah.
Ben Mee sort of like sticks out there, and Mings. So we haven't sort of mentioned Ben Mee. I don't think previously. So he may be somebody to look out for.
Yeah, however, he's one I'm kicking myself about because I'd been debating him with a friend the other day, and
but that was an exciting conversation, Luke.
Oh yeah, I mean those conversations about Ben Mee. I mean I love them, but then he scored and got a clean sheet.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, guess who I didn't go with. Yeah. I went with the cheapest Burnley player. So,
for me, I would tend to steer clear of people who are out the cup at the moment, just because if you've got them in the cup, you've got a random chance that they may play. When you look at the midfielders, same names as we mentioned before. It's quite interesting that you say Grealish, Zaha, 2 players knocked out the cup. Son's up there, so he's doing very well. So I wish I had him in my. Well, I say I wish. I think if you've had him in your team, you'll be doing very well. And the forwards, yeah, much as the muchness. Kane, DCL. Interesting one though. That again knocked out the cup is Wilson of Newcastle, and Che Adams. So Che Adams, even though for people who haven't got him, he may be a nice player to bring in if Southampton get their cup rearranged and you want to make a switch to a cheap striker, then and he's playing, that could be a very good pick. Wilson's quite an interesting one because have Newcastle got 1 or 2 games that are going to have to be rearranged? Because I think in game week 29 they're playing one of the teams that made the League Cup final. So they will have an extra game at some point. So you could have a little run.
Yeah. Dabble a bit later on.
Yeah.
I'm down with that. I mean, a couple of things on that. So Che Adams, Ings is back, right? And I'm a firm believer that when Ings is in the team, Adams doesn't score nearly as well. He wants to be the main man, and I think that's been borne out. Most of his points have been scored when Ings has been on the sidelines. Wilson, great surname, but he's a really weird one because he's the sort of player that I always think I really want to own him, and he keeps punishing me. But if you look on Twitter across all formats, the owners of Wilson are all people moaning that they own him and they want to sell him. And yet the fact he's there I think is really telling, and he's really close to Bamford and DCL. And the other one I wanted to kind of call out was DCL because I haven't looked too much into the stats, but he has dropped off of a cliff in terms of his goal output. And I'd be interested in your view on him. So I have sold DCL to move to a better defence. So he was the make weight to give me some better funds at the back. But I've got a nagging suspicion I may regret it. But at the same time, like I'd probably be looking at Bamford or Wilson or Kane or Vardy over him at the moment. But again, he's an interesting one.
I personally think on Carver Lewin, I think the tale of the tape of how it's played out so far. So when he had players like, Richarlison, Luca Dean, James Rodriguez, always playing well, and they had good fixtures, I think he did well. He went through a period of not having those, and they had tough fixtures, and then he didn't do well. They then went through a period, I think it was game week 9, 10 and 11, where he had the fixtures again, and they were back, and he did well. And since they haven't had him and they've had bad fixtures, he's done badly. So for me, I would kind of look at those things of having those players around him and having the fixtures. I'm just having a quick look, and from next week, so they're away to Wolves, which will be a tough game. They're then away to Villa. They then got Leicester. They're then home to Newcastle and then Leeds. So maybe looking around that period. But I've got to be honest. I think at 5.3 million, I think he was incredible value. I think now with all the players that have emerged, I think there's better value. He's not on penalties, which for me is quite a big thing as well. If when you look at the other options who have got pens. Any other thoughts there, Carl, on DCL?
No, though my gut feel was very much similar of the narrative that Luke gave, that I thought he was on fire at the beginning, but so were Everton as a team. Yeah. And of course, as the season goes on, it's your strength of depth, and he may not be getting the same quality of chances, I don't know, or people. His points, I haven't looked into it in depth. I've had him all season, but I'm looking to move on because there are other options there that I think he's quite expensive at 5.3.
I think he is now. I don't think he was at the start, but I think he is now. Yeah.
Well, no, he had a good run at the start, and I always think there's a certain level of just natural random variance. So people will score a few goals in a patch, and then they'll have a few games with 8 goals.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll just go in, every other game. But I think it's expensive. I will be looking to free up the money because there are other strikers I quite enjoy having in my team.
One thing to note, right, is that drop off has coincided with Luca Dean being out for 4, 5, 6 weeks. I don't know quite how long it is. And Peter Blake, who I used to work with, he loved Dean just purely for his underlying, because he was always, in the whole league, he was up there in the top 5 for big chances created for the last couple of seasons. And I think that may be something that factors in at that drop-off. I mean, I haven't looked at the numbers, so if anybody has, please ping me a tweet on this because I'd love to read it. But that might be something that changes his format. So I'm arguing against myself now, standard, isn't it? But, but it could be interesting if Dean comes back and he starts firing again. That might just be the catalyst to getting him back in. But yeah, we'll see. I'm not planning on it though. I'm with you on that, Carl.
Okay, so we've now got the optimum team up to this point in the season. So if you would have picked this team in game week 1 and made no transfers, you would be on 972 points, which would put you top of TFF with the current leader on 944. And this team reads Martinez in goals, Bednarek, Zuma, and Walker-Peters. So 2 Southampton defenders, which is interesting because Southampton players. So we had Vestergaard in the last one of game week 8, but other than that, we didn't have any Southampton defenders in at all. A midfield 4 then, so 3 premiums in Salah, Heung-min Son, and Bruno Fernandes, with Neto making up that 4th spot, and then Harry Kane up front with Bamford and Carver Lewin. If you'd have picked that team in game week 1, you'd be winning TFF with 40 transfers in hand, I suppose. Just looking very briefly at the profile of that now. So when we if we look at last season's optimum team, it was a 5-4-1. But so far, all through this season, the optimal formation has been 3-4-3, which I expect now to change from here on in personally. But that's really interesting. It's a massive difference going from 5-4-1 to 3-4-3. Carl, any comments on your optimal team?
Not my optimal team.
Well, not your optimal team. It's your slide.
It's unsurprising to a certain degree that some teams that, if you asked how they'd perform pre-season, I've gone miles above what some people's expectations are. I'm surprised Grealish isn't in there, but Aston Villa being one team and Southampton being another. They have been priced in that sort of manner, and they have performed, I think, above expectation. But they were still probably, Southampton in particular, and West Ham, I'd say, you could have expected them to be in the top half. but I don't think they've been priced accordingly. And Southampton have been fantastic this year in terms of, of course, Palace beat them 1-0 to kick them up the ass to start the season off. But apart from that, they performed fantastic. So once you've got two cheap defenders, you've just got so much money. Look at your midfield, 3 premiums, and you've got premium claim up front. That's all affordable because you've got those defenders.
Your thoughts, Luke?
Couple, yeah. I mean, number one, that's a lovely looking team, isn't it? Really, and the flexibility you've got with the 3 defenders is there's so many options there, so you can even jump on for your fixtures there. I think the other thing is probably a personal reflection. I was sort of talking about that value thing earlier. Clearly, you guys have adapted to this season better than me with your 3 up front, whereas I'm still, or maybe I'm just a trendsetter, as we might default to where we want to be. But yeah, it's quite interesting that it's 3 up front. I'm surprised at that actually, but it does make sense.
Okay, can I just mention one other point, because I mentioned Grealish, and it's just reminded me. It's worth noting that Bruno's got in there, but there's no Man United and no Man City players. Maybe because they've played less games, and therefore you would expect it to change, going forward. So there's no Man City players at all in your optimal 11.
And that's very rare, isn't it?
Yeah, well, because they played at least one game less, and they've had their harder fixtures in the first half of the season. That's my understanding.
I'm chuckling to myself because I think is that not just because all their players play about 25 to 28 games a season rather than 38? Apart from KDB and the keeper,
they've not been scoring goals either, have they? They've been scoring goals at a rate of around 60% of the number of goals they normally score. And I also think, we haven't touched on this yet, but I think the lack of second key contributions has had a dramatic impact on Man City players, because the way that Man City play, and we touched on this at the start of the season, didn't we? And I think even last year, Man City tend to put together 30, 40 beautiful passes, and that's the way they score. It's very rare, you see a cross coming in and a header into the top, kind of Burnley style. So I think that has dramatically cut out Man City's forwards points and KDB's in particular. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So just a slide on ownership. I always love it because you look at the kind of players on here, and there's still a few very highly owned players. We're not on any of those charts. And I'll tell you what else is interesting. In the top 20 players, there's only one Manchester City player in the whole of the top 20 most owned players. So Harry Kane is top. He's owned by 47% of the whole game. Heung-min Son at 42. You can't really argue with those. Salah third at 38. Bruno fourth, 37. Carver Lewin is still highly owned, but that's probably a hangover. I'd guess from his start. Zuma. So people have lashed on to Zuma. He's now owned by 30%. Grealish owned by 26. Bamford 25. So people have lashed on to Bamford. He's been, a sensation, obviously. Vardy 23. Timo Werner is still owned by 22% of players. So he was the highest at one point, I think, towards the start of the season. Kevin De Bruyne 22. Robertson 20. Sadio Mane 17. Ward-Prowse, Chilwell, and James Justin at 60, which I'm quite surprised at, because I think he's been quite a shrewd pick, Justin, in all fairness. I wouldn't say he's gone under my radar, but I've always had this thing of, when Pereira's back, when Castaña's back, he's going to lose his place. And he's just been absolutely superb in defence and attack. So well done anyone who's managed to jump on,
add him from the start.
Well, it's a hell of a
also had Timo Werner from the start.
I had Werner as well. Just to touch.
I'm just relieved that you finally sold him.
Yeah, he did.
Last time we chatted, you still had him.
Oh, goodness me. Yeah, but yeah, just touching ownership. A lot of very expensive ones, but a couple of a few shrewd picks in there. Zuma, Bamford, and Justin kind of poke out to me. In terms of It's interesting because normally you've got all the expensive strikers normally make up basically this whole list, and the expensive fullbacks like TAA and Robertson, but there's some very shrewd picks in there. So, well done, fantasy managers. It's maybe this is why it's so hard to get a good rank this season. Is maybe everyone's improving. Okay, so now we've understood what has happened in the first half of the season. Killer question as always is, how do we move forward? So for our YouTube watchers, we now have a graphic of the Hub's fixture ticker, which shows the teams with the best fixtures over the next 6 game weeks. And what it shows is Manchester City. So they've got 7 games in the next 6 game weeks. Home to Brighton, home to Palace, home to Villa, away to West Brom, home to Sheffield United. So 4 of their next 5 are home against Villa are not a bottom team in all fairness, but it's still a nice fixture. They're then away to Burnley after that as well. So the next 6 games are absolutely unbelievable before they meet Liverpool. They've also got an FA Cup game tomorrow at home to Birmingham. They will likely get through that, so they will likely have another FA Cup game somewhere in there as well. So they're going to have a run of 7 or 8 sensational looking games. So this is where the majority of my focus is going moving forward on this. Manchester City, for me, is the way to go. West Ham, a second, so they have got Burnley and West Brom next, and then Palace and Man United have got nice fixtures. They've just gone through in the Cup as well. They've just beaten Watford 1-0, so they will have an FA Cup game as well. They've got, United have got Burnley, Liverpool, Fulham, Sheffield United, Arsenal, Southampton and Everton. You've then got Leeds, who are obviously, I think they're playing their FA Cup game tomorrow, I want to say. Then they're home to Brighton, home to Southampton, Newcastle, and then got Fulham and Leicester. Down the bottom, the teams with not nice fixtures. So Crystal Palace sit at the bottom, then Brighton, Everton, and Spurs. So for me, I'm all over Man City, and that's it really for the rest of the podcast. Luke, what are your thoughts? Kind of looking at the fixtures for January, maybe a bit beyond.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's as usual, there's a couple I would probably challenge slightly in terms of how difficult those games are. I'll come back to that because Spurs last time when we spoke were at the bottom, and I said actually they could do really well, and then they did really well against the hard teams, and then they've screwed it up against all the
You're right.
I feel for you there, mate, as a Spurs fan, but yeah, City. I think a call out, and I'm hopefully I'm not stealing your thunder because I think a lot of the people listening will probably be aware. But City have a 4-1 over Liverpool, including the cup. So Birmingham, I think you said, but then Brighton, Palace, Villa, while Liverpool play Man United away. Salah's gone for me very soon, put it that way, for a few games. He'll be coming back. But that is just a golden ticket, that one, isn't it, really? So if you haven't got KDB and you've got Salah, it's a no-brainer. I think, yeah, just touching on the Spurs one, they've got Sheffield United, and that's not showing as an easy game on the colour code. I don't think there's an easier game, really. I'd stick them in with Fulham and West Brom, to be honest.
I think it's because they don't tend to concede many goals. They only tend to concede maybe 1 or 2. But I take your point.
But yeah, I mean, I like you. I think we're all there targeting Man City, and I'm targeting West Ham. I think West Ham, Moyes have got them playing really, really well. I think Cresswell particularly, but they've got a few boys at the 2.5, 2.4 price if they're fit, and I keep getting the ones in that were fit and then they get dropped or injured. So wasted transfers on West. So I just want Cresswell now. I think I can get him. But, so yeah, it's quite interesting. Now Arsenal is another one because they have got, it looks like Aubameyang started in the cup today, which I don't know what price Smith Rowe is in this game, but in all other games, he is ridiculously cheap. And I'll have a look in a minute.
I'd be surprised if he's actually in the game. I'll take a look.
Oh, he's got to be in the game. He scored some goals and stuff now, but he could, even though Arsenal's run isn't great. I mean, if he's if he's sort of in the low 2s. I would estimate 2.4 is probably where I'd reckon he'll be priced at. But
he's 2.6.
2.6. And what is he? Is he down as a forward or as a midfielder? Oh God! Imagine if he's down as a defender, piling in.
Take a look now. It doesn't actually say, but I'll find it now.
But their next few games, Palace, Newcastle, Southampton, could be pretty good. And Man United, they concede, so I wouldn't say Arsenal won't score there. Wolves aren't the Wolves defensively they were at the start of the season or the end of last season. And then Villa, which is, that's probably the hardest game they've got. So again, Spurs and Arsenal's fixtures, albeit they're down there, in my head is probably saying they're not as difficult as they appear to be on paper. Okay. And somebody like Smith Rowe, if he keeps his place at his price, he could be a little gem.
He's a midfielder, but I think that's I think that's a really fair point. Is if he holds his place is a problem, I suppose, isn't it? But it's a really good point. Carl, what are your initial thoughts on those fixtures?
Yeah, well, on Smith Rowe, I wouldn't take the chance myself. Just because you're using a transfer to bring in a cheap player, and you will always be wondering, has he got his place? And then you'll be a couple of weeks later probably transferring mates for someone else as a replacement, and that's 2 transfers gone.
Saka is 3.1. Is probably just worth just in terms of a comparison, probably a bit more nailed on and classed as a midfielder.
If you're doing that, take Tierney at 3.2.
I do. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for me, over the short term, I haven't even really, even though Man City are top and got these as fixtures, I just they're such a no-brainer to try to get in over the short term, as many as you wish, and to keep them, because traditionally they do well in the cups. Yeah. So if they do reach another cup final, you don't need to bring in players that quite often you tend to gravitate that way. They've got 2 games. Well, they've got 3 games over the next 2 game weeks. So it doesn't matter who they're playing, you just want them in anyway. The fact that they're playing relatively weaker sides, the bottom half of the league sides, just makes them much more promising. And the same with Man United, to be honest. West Ham, another one because they've got a cup game. So I may bring in a West Ham player. Cresswell was mentioned before. If he plays in the cup, I think, that's a good opportunity to make the transfer. But below that, I tend on the Telegraph itself start focusing a little, having much more in my mind about the cup, looking at teams, which players are playing, and which ones are likely to progress. Man City having 2 games, it's get those in and make some transfers further down the line. Liverpool, I was surprised how strong the side they put out against Villa on Friday, because I would have got rid of Salah previously, because I didn't expect him to play. That was the other player who scored from the team, but obviously that was yesterday, not today. And it's he'll be gone because he won't be playing in the next round, and therefore he won't be coming back in my team. And the final one is Spurs. Without looking at their fixtures, if I add them, I'd be quite worried because of COVID and their game's quite likely to be called off. And even though I haven't got any Spurs players, I would look at a non-league match, and if Son or Kane starts, I'd be quite happy to bring them in then. But I wouldn't probably wish to keep them, because if they aren't playing, it doesn't matter how easy or difficult the match is. It's no points is 0 points. So,
yeah, agree. And just in terms of some of the players, then, so we talked about the teams to target. In terms of West Ham, some of the ownerships are so low on some of the assets we're going to be looking to bring in. So Antonio, if you're that way inclined, I know you're an injury risk, but they just signed Haller, but Antonio's currently under 2% owned, which is obviously, and he's 4.7 million midfielder, which if he can find his feet, if he can stay in that team and stay fit, to me that is an absolute steal.
And when you say he's 2.8% owned, they must be dead teams, because since they played for about 6 months, I don't know why you'd own him.
No, definitely. But I think the point is, obviously, if you jump on him quickly ahead of everyone else, you're going to get some big rank rises. The Man City players, I mean, I couldn't believe it when I looked, especially the defenders, right? So Diaz, who's obviously been a sensational sign for City, really sorted them out the back. Diaz is under 5% owned at 3.8 million. So not only is he an amazing price, he is also really good. He's also got very low ownership. Cancelo, who basically starts every game and not far plays off, a number 8 or number 10 sometimes. He's under 3% owned at 3.7 million, which to me again looks an absolute steal. Stones, who's obviously recently broken into the team, 3.2 million. What a price that is. And he is under 2% owned, right? So you could bring in Diaz, Stones, and Cancelo, and if they, look, that kind of run of 8 games we looked at, okay, they won't all play all of them, right? And they may be, the odd bit of rotation. Hopefully, there's no more COVID upper swim wins for Man City. If they keep 4 or 5 clean sheets in that 8-game period, which I think they're more than capable of doing, and you own 3 of those, that is 21 points per game off your defenders over this next month, and that's certainly a way I'm maybe not all 3, but that's kind of certainly a way I'm looking to go. Another interesting one is a certain Sergio Aguero is under 2.5% owned. For obvious reasons, the same as Antonio. He's just been injured, right? But you're absolutely right. So if he plays tomorrow against Birmingham, which Pep says he will, I don't know. I mean, is that a move? Bear in mind, their next 5 games, then, not including the other round of the cup, they're at home for him. And Aguero is the kind of player as well, if he comes off the bench, he's just as likely to score a goal as if he starts. So that's a really intriguing option for me there as well, especially at his ownership. You mentioned Man United, so obviously Bruno is such a wonderful player in every format, right, and in real life. Rashford is under 10% owned, which I still think a 6.1, because they've changed their system now a bit, and he's playing as a striker. His late runs, he's going to get a load of points. He's classed as midfield in TFF. I think he's a really good option there as well. And just a couple of the other ones we've talked about. Tierney is 13% owned. Their next few fixtures are nice. I'm not sure I'd be bringing him in now. I think I've been quite forced in that I held on to it. I wasn't sure I would bring him in ahead of someone like Stones or Cancelo or Diaz now, but he looks decent. Dyer at 2.9 for Spurs. Spurs have got this new way of playing where they're just happy to sit on a 1-0 lead. 2.9 million, under 11% owned. And just a couple of other ones which I saw. So Bednarek and Bednarek 8%, Walker Peters 6%, Meslier is 9%. Loughton, who I actually had in my game week 1 team, and I took him out because Burnley just looked absolutely awful. I think he picked up an injury actually, but Loughton at 2.1 million. If you're desperate for a real enabler, he's only 3% owned as well. Target for Villa has had a really good season, and so he's 2.6 million. He's under 3% owned. They are out of the FA Cup, but they will have rearranged games to look forward to in the future as well. And the only one kind of written in my list, I touched on Creswell, who's 10% owned, and Justin, who's just, what a pick he's been. I'm so gutted I haven't jumped on Justin, but he's 16% owned. So they're kind of a few of the players, especially the City ones, very excited about. Not only because I think they'll score loads of points, but their ownership. I find that absolutely crazy. Any thoughts, guys?
I hope you're right, because I've got Diaz and Cancelo. So, Aguero is the one, because Jesus has been out. I don't know whether he's back.
I think he's back fit.
But I mean, it's not even a debate over who's the best. Even at, what is he, 32, 33, still their best striker by a country mile. He just needs to be fit. I mean, I heard interesting rumours, and it is completely unsubstantiated, but it seems very viable because Aguero used to be married to, or certainly has a kid with Maradona's daughter. And I think he was apparently hit this is what I've heard, is he's been hit he's absolutely devastated by the death of Maradona. And that could easily explain where he's gone, because these little niggly injuries, Aguero's always had it, but he's always had plenty of game time around those niggly injuries, hasn't he? So if he's getting back to, I guess, a mental strength that allows him to play, then he's probably going to have a point to prove as well, isn't he? If he's got that sort of motivation behind him. So
I saw a quote from Pep today to say that he is back, he's fit, he's hungry, and he's excited. So that's what you want from the probably, one of, if not the best striker that the Premier League has ever seen in a run of fixtures like this.
It's the best tweet you can do as well, isn't it? Every time if you're an Aguero owner, there's only one word that's
just a series of O's at the end.
I haven't done that for a while.
No, definitely. Any thoughts, Carl, on that? Is that kind of, are you looking that way in terms of your next moves, or are you looking somewhere else?
I'm definitely be piling into Man City. It's just a question of which players you think will be playing, and therefore I'll be looking at the defence. Kevin De Bruyne and Sterling. All the others are good players, can rack up the points, but it's like, how much of a run will they have, and then suddenly to go like Foden. Beginning of the season,
believe it.
I thought he's marvellous, fantastically priced, cheap. Had him in there. He doesn't actually create as much as I thought, but he didn't play. Same with Mahrez and Gundogan. They always appear, and you think, got to get them, and then it's like they don't play again. So
Foden is now, in his last few games, he's been first choice, and he's been so dangerous. He's been scoring goals, getting assists. Even the game they played the other night, when was it? In the EFL semi-final, Foden set up Gundogan, who scored. It was offside. Foden scored a goal himself. It was offside. Foden set up the goal that, the first goal for Stones. Foden's very, very involved. It's just the problem is you bring him in, and Pep is just as likely then to leave at home and watch on the TV, and it's so frustrating.
Yeah, and it won't just do it for a week. It'd be like for a month or 6 weeks.
Yeah, well, you're right.
If it's just like I missed odd game through rotation, you can handle it. And he's not the only player. So with the strike force of Jesus and Aguero, it's like I think they'll rotate, especially with like Europe coming back on stream. So
I think with City, I don't mind them rotating. I think that this is the thing with me. If Jesus starts ahead of Aguero and Jesus gets 65 minutes and Aguero gets 25, I'm happy with that. If they're scoring goals, I think this is the important part. Is it seems like they turned a bit of a corner now. They obviously got the goals against Chelsea, scored a couple in the week, in the EFL. But before that, they were averaging like a goal a game for a long time, which is where you don't want Aguero, KDB, Mahrez, Foden, because they're just not doing it. But hopefully they turn the corner.
Just on that, and I think anybody who follows me on Twitter knows my disdain of Man City when Gundogan starts. However, I think he and they have turned a corner. So he scored, I think he's got 3 goals in the last 5. Pep last season, there's a great article in the Athletic about, I think the Panenka or something is what they call it. But basically Gundogan is there for ticky-tacky football. And that's what David Silva was.
Yeah.
And he looks like he's dropped a couple of pounds, because Gundogan, I made a comment a while back that actually looks less in shape than me, and that's not saying much after a couple of Christmases in lockdown for a year. But he actually seems to have got his head together, and actually he keeps getting in the box. I mean, I'm not convinced at 3.9 million, but I think he is probably, after Diaz and KDB, I think he's probably the third name on the team sheet now. And if he is in that team with that run, if you think of him like David Silva, would you want David Silva in for that run? I'm not saying do it, but I'm going to be closely monitoring that, because he could be a little gem if they do progress in the cup. And yeah, I'm more convinced about him than Foden, it has to be said. I know you've got a massive love-in for Foden, but every time I own Foden, he gets me 1 point, and every time I don't, he goes
gets you
massive.
16.
But I own him a lot more than I don't own him, and that's the problem. So
okay, so we've now got a graphic up from the Fantasy Football Hub's Telegraph transfer planner. So we know we're all targeting Man City. I think any TFF player in their right mind would be targeting Man City and this run. And what we've got in front of us, it shows that starting from tomorrow in the FA Cup. Now, it's important to obviously note that you don't want to be making moves probably tomorrow for players who don't start tomorrow. So, if you've got your eye on Diaz, for example, and he doesn't start tomorrow, he's not on the bench, it's probably not worth bringing him in, because you can wait until the next game. Just for example, in case we get any more news about COVID or injury or wherever else. But starting tomorrow, Man City have got a 4-for-1 over Liverpool. So for those who don't know what that is, it means that Man City play 4 matches in the time that Liverpool only play 1. And that Liverpool's 1 game is against Manchester United, who you think, are going to kind of shut up shop and try and contain Liverpool, who are struggling for goals anyway, right? So this is where we start to think about how we can optimise our transfers. Another standout there for me is Villa. So Villa have got 3 games, even though they're out of the FA Cup, they've got 3 games to Liverpool's 1, and they may even have a 4th. They're kind of what we were talking about earlier. So, if they get a rearranged game put into that FA Cup weekend, they could also have a 4-for-1 over Liverpool as well. So I was thinking of getting rid of Ollie Watkins, but now I'm actually thinking of getting rid of Salah. Now that I've analysed it, I was going to keep Salah and get rid of Ollie Watkins, but now I'm thinking the other way around. I might get rid of Salah and keep Watkins, is what I'm kind of looking at.
The other one all out there, mate, is Spurs 3-0 over Liverpool. So if Kane and Son start in the FA Cup
against Marine,
yeah, but
really good shout.
Yeah, it's a risk, because I think the Villa Spurs game, I think that's only 50-50 that goes ahead.
I think it's less, I gotta be honest. I can't see it. I know they played their kids last night in the FA Cup, but Villa are really going for it in the league. They managed to scrape a team of kids together just to fulfill their FA Cup fixture. I cannot see them doing that in the league. I can't see how they would allow it, because if they did it for that one, they'd also have to do it probably for their next one, which is against Everton on the following weekend. So I personally think it'll be off. So that's the only risk with bringing a Spurs player tomorrow. However, if Kane and Son start against Marine, who are in I think it's the 8th tier of English football tomorrow, and you haven't got them, it could be a long day if you don't own them. But it's a really good shout. So assuming all 3 of us are going to jump on Man City players, who start tomorrow, I would guess. I suppose the question is, which players now? We've mentioned a lot of options. Which players do you think we're actually targeting? So who are the best options to jump on? So Carl, I'll come to you first now. Who are the ones that, if they're in the team sheet tomorrow, you'll be bringing in tomorrow 100%?
The ones I'll be bringing in for my own team, well, not quite 100%, because I'm sure I can't have all 3, would be the 3 defenders, Diaz, Stones and Cancelo.
Yeah.
Kevin De Bruyne, if he starts. And those are the only ones which I'll definitely say. Okay. The other one, which depends on how I feel when I wake up, would be Sterling. He's disappointed. It's not that he's disappointed me. To me, he's got such high standard. I expect such high standards. He's not at those same high standards. He's still performing, but not at the top level.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. How about you, Luke?
I've got 3 of them already. So
a good spot.
Aguero, if he starts, is probably my move. So it'll be Salah to Aguero. If Aguero doesn't start and Sterling does tomorrow, I will probably go Salah to Sterling instead. Point on Sterling, I guess, is Sterling's way. I very rarely own Sterling, and there's a reason for that, because he's barren for weeks, if not months on end. And then he'll score a hat-trick, a brace, a hat-trick, and then he's barren again. And I seem to miss it every time. But, I mean, yeah, the old, he's due. He really, really is due. But the eye test on Sterling is the only thing that's probably kept me off that, because he's missing really easy chances, but not Sterling tap-ins over the bars. He's not getting in the positions he used to get into. So I don't get it. But he is due, so I think it will be Salah to Sterling or Aguero, whichever of those two start for me.
And then obviously, more for Callum, probably for me, who haven't got many or any Man City. I don't think, if obviously they don't start tomorrow, you'll probably look to bring in the ones then who got your eye on Wednesday evening then when they play Brighton.
Well,
when they start.
Yeah, I plan on bringing the City ones in and holding them. And if I don't bring them in, I'd bring them in on the Tuesday. But sort of like to Luke, when you say about Aguero, would you be bringing him in just for that game and then hopping off, or would you'd be keeping him longer term as well?
If Aguero's fit, I don't care whether he plays 10 minutes of a game or 90 minutes. He can. I mean, he's just devastating. He's still, maybe Kane is up there with him now in the league, but as an out and out striker, he's, in my opinion, still the best in the league. And yeah, so I would want him. What I would say, because you still get a point for a player coming on. If KDB doesn't start and is on the bench and you don't own him, KDB will start those 3 league fixtures because they have to win it. So I would go with a view of, if KDB's on the bench and doesn't start, and you haven't got him, he is the one you want for City, because he's the only nailed attack 90-minute player. So even if he's on the bench and you haven't got him, I would argue that's the one you need to go for first out of all of their players.
So I think, and I'm undecided, because especially Luke knows this about me, I think, but I plan very, very carefully, but I also can have a rush of blood, shall we say. But 2 seasons ago, when I had my best ever season in TFF, I was in a position where there was a run of fixtures like this for Man City, and they had its volume and its quality of fixtures. And it's very rare you get something like this over a whole season. And what I did when I had that fantastic season is I jumped on 6 or 7 Man City players all at the same time. The only thing I would say is the second KCs, the removal of that, I think has changed the dynamic of the attacking players for Man City. I really think it has. Whereas like Mahrez, just like Sterling used to get so many points because they would pass to KDB, who would slip it through for Aguero to finish. They'd all end up on 5 points, 7 points. That's not there anymore, and that's the only thing slightly holding me back. Holding me back. Saying that, I think what we've talked about with the value in defence, same as Carl, right? So assuming they're nailed on back 4 now, obviously Edison goals. I think at 4.4 million is quite expensive actually, but assuming their back 4 consists of, I think it's obviously it's Stones and Diaz, and then you've got Cancelo will either play generally with Walker or with Mendy, depending. If Walker plays, Cancelo tends to move over onto the left-hand side. If Mendy plays, Cancelo plays on the right. But I think Cancelo, Diaz and Stones to me are probably the 3 most nailed players there, and their price. So 3.8, 3.7 and 3.2. Fantastic value. I'm tempted to use 5 transfers this week to bring in a bit of a Stones, Cancelo and Diaz, and potentially also De Bruyne. Definitely De Bruyne and potentially Aguero as well. And the reason I'm tempted by that kind of other move is that I hadn't actually spotted this Salah, this one game and then their next game after that. So they'll play in the FA Cup, right? So obviously, Salah will do well around there. But Man City have turned the corner. They're playing well. They've got the volume of fixtures and quality of fixtures. Liverpool haven't got the volume, and they're not playing well either. And their fixtures are actually not that amazing either. So Man United's next 3 fixtures were... Hang on, where have we gone now? I've lost... Liverpool's next 3 fixtures are Man United. They're then home to Burnley, and Burnley are quite solid defensively. They're then away to Spurs, and then they're away to West Ham after that as well, who have been defending well. So I don't think Liverpool assets at the moment are the best. So this is why I'm tempted to go kind of literally all in on Man City. So they're my thought, and maybe even bring in 1 or 2 more next week. Obviously a week's a long time in the Premier League at this point. And I also think the draw, which will be on Monday night for the FA Cup, is important as well. If Liverpool get a really, really plum home, a plum tie against, a League 2 team, for example, I think the landscape is very different for if they draw, a really good team as well.
Slightly disagree on that last point, right? Purely because if they get a League 2 team, for example, they will play the kids. If they get a top end,
like last night.
Well, yeah, I know, but it annoys me because Klopp moaning about all fixture congestion, all my players. Shut up. Sorry, I normally like that man, but
and he played a strong team against Midtjylland in a dead rubber in the Champions League where Jota got injured, didn't he? And then he done that last night. It's unbelievable.
Well,
sorry.
I think whoever Liverpool play in the 4th round, he'll play the kids.
Okay.
I think the reason why he played such a strong team last night was because they score a few goals, a bit of confidence, and they're not playing in midweek.
Yeah.
So they've got a natural break. I think if they were playing this midweek and had the break the following week, he'd have had the kids out in the first round. I don't think he cares about the cup. It's just like too many fixtures, and you've got Europe and the league to think about.
Could also have been a bit of pride as well from that 7-2 drubbing Villa gave him. He might have wanted to absolutely spank him, stick 10 or something. Yeah. Interesting to have been in that dressing room beforehand.
And I think the only other thing I would add then, is if it was someone like Arsenal had these fixtures, right, I obviously wouldn't do it because then I'm not going to want to shift a lot of them on. But I'm going to want to probably keep these players probably the rest of the season, at least the defenders, for example, and and KDB. So I suppose that's worth in pointing out. If it was Leeds or Leicester or Arsenal, I wouldn't be piling on 5 or 6 players but City from here on in, I think, are going to be the premium team. They're the favourites for the Premier League. They're odds-on favourites. They take the FA Cup seriously as well. So that's my kind of thing. With Spurs and Villa, who are going to have a kind of backlog of fixtures, who've got really good options both in attack and defence. As soon as the schedule sorts itself out, and we see we mentioned them earlier, right? So we see the period of games where they're going to play. They're going to have 4-for-1s over a lot of teams, I guess. Especially Spurs are going to have a lot of games in quick succession. That's when I would look to maybe pivot away from a couple of players and maybe bring in Dyer and Kane, for example, or Dyer and Son, and the same with Villa, right? So looking at players like maybe Target and Watkins and Grealish, when they have a 4-for-1 over a team like Liverpool or Chelsea or whoever it is. So I think later down the line, February, March, whenever it is, I'll be jumping on those then. So anything more to add, guys, on the kind of upcoming month's schedule?
Else for me?
No, I just want to play reference to your dream team. I saw that the other day. I think you've got 7 or 8 City players in that already, haven't you? So yeah, he's certainly going all eggs in all baskets in all formats.
I just think they're the best. They're the best. They're the best team. They've got the best players. They've got the best fixtures. And if you want to, do well in something, you've got to kind of, chuck your thing. And I've got previous, and this is what I mean, a couple of years ago, I think I went from, I want to say I was just outside the top 2K at this time, and then 3 weeks later was in the top 400 but they had the second KCs, and this is the only thing which makes me a little bit nervous, because they were beating teams 3-0, 5-0, 4-0, and they were just points coming in from everywhere. So I'm hoping for a similar thing. 5.5K at the moment. If I can get up to the top 2K by the end of the month with a team full of City players and 16, 17 transfers in hand, I think it'd be in a really good spot.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've now got the optimum team algorithm for the next 10 game weeks. So this is what the algorithm says we should be looking at for the next 10 game weeks. Unsurprisingly, Ederson in goal, Cancelo, Diaz, Fernandinho. I'm assuming, Carl, that the algorithm, obviously, it kind of looks at things of last season and odds and stuff. But instead of Fernandinho, you would probably have Stones there instead of him, I would guess. Whoever's going to play in that spot.
Yeah.
And then Zuma. It then says a 3 of Bruno Fernandes, Riyad Mahrez, and El Ghazi at Villa. We haven't mentioned El Ghazi, actually. That's a really interesting one. He's only 3.2 million. He's been in sensational form. Obviously, when Barkley's back, we're not really sure how that midfield dynamic is going to work. But El Ghazi has been on fire. Just a question, actually. Has El Ghazi crossed either of your minds in terms of bringing him in?
Hasn't really hasn't crossed my mind. When I look at that, it's like, and knowing what he's done recently, I think, I wish I brought him in, but he's not within my plans going forward.
And then, I do this every week, don't I? There's a player and you go, not a chance, and then he goes and smashes it. But no, every time. But no, 3.2. I'd be getting Neto over El Ghazi if I had 3.2 on a midfielder.
Okay, and then there's a front 3 of Harry Kane, Callum Wilson, and surprisingly, or not surprisingly, because I'm sure he was in an earlier one. It may have not been this season. I think it was in a game week 1 potentially. But Chris Wood at 5 million is in the algorithm. And you comment, Carl, that it's slightly distorted, obviously, because Man City, Man United and Burnley all have an extra match. Have you got any kind of commentary on that?
Well, and Aston Villa have got an extra match as well.
Yeah, I think I said that.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said Burnley. No. So you got the 4 teams at the beginning, which had a blank in game week 1. If you've got, so they've got like 11 matches, everyone else is 10. So it's not surprising that it's, if you're sort of saying over the next 10 weeks that those are going in there. And I also wouldn't take that much notice, because to me it depends on FA Cup matches. But yeah, that seems, Mahrez, actually, I may have taken out if I'd spotted it when I run the algorithm, because he's not playing that regular. So what the algorithm does, it says if you've played at least half the matches this season, we'll assume that you play over the next 10 weeks.
Yeah.
So to get rid of the players who've just played one game and got good stats. And then based on all that, it's come out of these players. Mahrez, I wouldn't trust to be a starter going forward.
It gives you a profile of the team, doesn't it? I tend to look at the players, but I'm personally more interested in the profile of that team. The Man City back 4 and goalkeeper. Kane still up front, Bruno still. And then a few of the guys. I kind of like I like looking at how the profile of the team looks more than the.
Yeah, so I also quite enjoyed looking at the what do you call it, the cheap player, the enabler.
Yeah, exactly.
Because those are the ones that you don't notice, like all the Brunos, the Sons, the Kanes, the Salahs. We all know about those. They're right in our consciousness. But the El Ghazis, we don't think about. The Netos, may miss them. The Besnaks in Southampton, we forget about.
Yeah, I'm just doing the quick maths on it, but if you swap Mahrez and Wood, you point 2 off this, but for KDB and Bamford, you'd look at that and go, yeah, well, with Ferrandinho out for somebody, but I mean, if Ferrandinho, Mahrez and Wood, those 3 for another 3. So if it was Stones and KDB and Bamford, I think you'd be very happy with it. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, we did have a few questions from Twitter and from the Fantasy Football Hub WhatsApp Telegraph group. So we had one on Twitter of Big Cheese FPLs, which is first season playing TFF. How much do the FA Cup games influence your transfers and the players you bring in? Do you attack plum ties in early rounds, or does the FA Cup merely form part of your longer term plans and decisions? Luke, do you want to answer this one?
I love this question because me and Carl always disagree on this one. But
you remember?
I don't consider the FA Cup at all until you get to the quarterfinals, because that's the point where the big teams generally play their strong teams. But then Leicester put out a fairly strong team, and so have Liverpool, which really surprised. I was very pleasantly surprised having Justin and Salah. But so for me, it doesn't influence it that much, with the one caveat for Man City, because knowing the FA Cup's there for players like Mahrez or Foden, if they don't play in the league, they will play in the Cup. And so with the Pep Roulette factor, it probably increases my likelihood of getting a Man City player in, because across the board, they'll get more minutes. But no, until the quarterfinals, I don't really look at it. And when it does get to the quarterfinals, what I'm looking at is who are the two teams I think that get to the final. And I generally lump on them, much like Andrew's talking about lumping on City. My best season years back was Man United, and I think I had 7 or 8 Man United players when they won everything. But that was wonderful. You also got penalty shootouts, so I had one penalty shootout where I had 4 out of the 5 penalty takers, and I got a penalty save from my keeper. It was a wonderful night, that was. But but Carl, I think you put more stock in the cup games from memory.
Yeah, well, I think the early rounds are important. I don't target them in the sense of, before the season's the round starts, they've got an easy fixture, just because there's so much rotation. But I think the FA Cup is an important time to be able to phase some of the transfers that you wish to do. So we've sort of talked about for West Ham, Cresswell. So if I want to bring in Cresswell, now it's sort of coming into my consciousness. If he's playing in that FA Cup, it's a great fixture to put him in. Spurs are playing, what do we say, tier 8 team? I've got no Spurs players. But if Kane starts and Son starts, they're going in for that fixture, even if they're coming out 2 matches later, because they could win 8-0. So I would be. That's why I save up my transfers when I've been good, so I can, if opportunities arise, I go in there. Man City, I haven't got many players. If they're coming in, this is a good time to get an extra match out of them. If they play, then I'll get Man City in the cup and other matches at the same time.
I think that's I think that's a really good point. You can use it as a pivot point to maybe get those extra games, can't you? Out of a player which you're taking out, and also out of a player which you're putting in. So if you use Salah as an example, so we got Friday's night game out of Salah. He may have started or not, and if we move him on tomorrow for KDB or Aguero, you're kind of making the transfer you want to make, but you're also getting 2 extra games in the bargain.
Yeah, but I'm very similar to Luke in terms of coming to the quarters and semis. I tried to load up because you get the extra games from the cup final and the rearranged games. But I will, in previous years, if there's a good player that's going to play on the first night, I think I had Kane or Son a few seasons ago. They played on the Friday night and actually did play, because that's an expensive player, and I can then transfer and hop to any good players that I wish in because they're playing non-league teams in case they score a hat-trick.
We also had a question in our WhatsApp group of Peter Marshall. So we'd be interested to hear views on the FA Cup, which we've mentioned, but also thoughts on transfer count and planning in light of COVID postponements and fixture congestion. So I think we've talked about COVID postponements and fixture congestion. There's not an awful lot we can do, right? Maybe then look at January as a whole month and not try and be too intricate in terms of the days, because games are going to fall foul, games will be added in. You can't really do a lot about that. So I would suggest is looking as January as as kind of a block, which is why we said about Man City. But thoughts on transfer counts? We haven't really mentioned transfer count yet. So, Luke, you said you're on 26. Carl, you're on 22.
Yeah,
I'm on 23. So, I think So I'm planning on using, say, 5 or 6 maybe in this month to go into February with whatever that would be, kind of 17 Oz. I'm perfectly, based on previous experience. I know this season started late, so it's not really a kind of like for like, but I'm quite happy with that actually. I'd be happy with that if I got to where I wanted to be, where the top kind of 1 or 2K by the end of January with half a team of Man City with 17 transfers left. I perfectly see myself in a really good spot, to be able to really attack the kind of run in then, and have a good finish. What are your guys' thoughts on transfer count and things as it stands, Luke?
I mean, we haven't got. Well, another reminder to keep chasing the Telegraph guys for those transfer counts, because you have. Okay, good. There you go. It's the monthly reminder. I am convinced that a lot of the people who are up at the top of the league will have burned through those transfers. So I think if you are, my target was 28 going into January, which thankfully is probably the first year in a long time I did, but then I had to burn 3 very, very quickly. So I think I had 29 and got down to 26. But yeah, this is the time to make ground. And if you are sat there with 25 or above, I would say you've got probably at least 5, if not 10, above most of the people that are sat above you. And they will not have taken advantage of Man City 4-for-1s over Liverpool and things like that, which is now you can use that. I think the other thing that the luxury it gives, and Carl sort of touched on this, that if Kane starts tomorrow and Son starts tomorrow, I will go hell or high water for that one game, because there's a significant chance that one of those two players could score 4, 5, 6 goals in a game, and you don't want to be missing them. And that's where these transfers really come. So I think I didn't mention it on the FA Cup thing, but if you do get a dead rubber and you can pile in on that, I think the other point, which I sort of loosely touched on earlier, was the COVID postponements thing, which is part of the question. And this is probably a season where you've got to be really reactive. And again, if you've got 5 or 10 transfers on most of your rivals, you've got that nice, easy decision. Let's say Spurs Villa gets postponed. You've got that nice, easy hop on to some other, Man City player or something like that. Whereas others are going to be I'm just going to have to get him back. And so it's 2 transfers. Well, you use 2 transfers because you'll get the points and you'll be back on and you still have more transfers than most of the people that sat above you. So I think this is a very reactive one. And I think if you're sat with 25 or more, you're in a very good position. If you're sat with 25 to 20, you're in a good position. If you've got under 20, I wouldn't want to be there.
Okay. Question for you, Carl. So this was off, I think, our WhatsApp group. Question for the pod. Do you think it's worth transferring out Patrick Bamford to accommodate a second Man City defender, given their run of games and attitude towards the FA Cup?
Oh, what sort of question is that? It depends on your team entirely. I think Bamford's is still a good choice. I'd like to see if he plays tomorrow, but I working on the assumption that he does. I wouldn't be taking Bamford out. We've seen on the previous charts, he's top value for money as a striker. So I wouldn't be doing that transfer. I'd be looking elsewhere in your team to make a different transfer out to bring in a Man City defender. I think what he's doing here is sort of saying, I want 2 pots of gold and I'll only choose one. I'm saying choose them both and get rid of a bit of silver.
Nice phrase there, Carl. I completely agree. Bamford for me, so I'm moving to a 5-4-1 and leaving Bamford up front because I think he's that good a player and that good value as the striker at 4.2 million. So I wouldn't say Bamford. However, in terms of moving on to Man City, 100%. You know, as we mentioned earlier, so if you've got like Salah, Mane, any of these players, as long as you've got some transfers in hand, which is why in the first half of the season we said keep your transfers back, because this is the time to use them now. You can take out Salah. You can even take out, if you've got Robertson, for example, you could take out Salah and Robertson now. You could pile into Man City, and then at the end of the month, or when you fancy Liverpool to come back and come good, you can go back if you want, or you can stay with Man City. But I wouldn't take out Bamford for me at the moment, as long as he continues even roughly on the on his path of scoring points at the moment. For me, he's a season keeper. But we'll see. And finally, we had a question off at KG_FF Ball. Listen to this. In your experience, are there any tried and tested methods of improving rank in TFF if you're top 10, 100, 1,000, etc.? I'm currently ranked top 300 with 22 transfers left. What a position to be in, by the way. And feel like I'm winging it at the moment. So he's just shown us his midfield. He's got a midfield of Grealish, Son, De Bruyne, Salah, and Bruno. I haven't seen anything else of his team, but I would very quickly answer that question to say, in terms of tried and tested methods of improving rank in TFS, especially where you are, I would just move on to Man City defense. Maybe take out Salah. You could have a punt on Salah to Aguero, right, and move him back. If you wanted to, but I would move on to Man City defense because they are so cheap. I would take out Salah for the time being. I don't win all season, and I would use those funds to jump on Man City, and you will very likely see some really good jumps from 300 up to even higher. Luke, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. I think he's probably made a spelling mistake. So I think he meant to say, I feel like I'm winning it at the moment. Because I bloody would be if I was there.
What a rank. It's unbelievable rank. It's brilliant.
I think the one bit of advice, and I think this, if you listen to like the Sky podcast with people like Liam and Dan, right, with 22 transfers, you are going to have more than most of the people in the top 500, right? Fact, you are just going to have more transfers. So I think what I would do in his position is follow all the good players you can possibly find who are ranked around you. It's harder on Telegraph, but you'll find them. And basically any obvious moves that they are doing with that transfer account, just cover all the big moves. So Salah to Man City player, right? You're going to get your 4-1, or Salah to Kane if you haven't got him, if Kane starts, and just keep following those trends, and that will fire you. I mean, all you're doing is basically sort of on paper treading water because you're making the obvious transfers. But if somebody's got 12 transfers, not 22, they can't make that move. And every time you do that, you're gaining probably 5, 10, 15, 20 points on them. So I think that's what you do. That's a phenomenal place to be. I wish I was there.
I think your point as well on Kane tomorrow, if he starts against Marine, is a really important one, purely because of his ownership as well. So he's 47% owned, right? So we're making all these, really, really great plans. If Kane starts and he bangs in a hat-trick, against a team in the 8th tier of English football, nearly half of all I think there's 130,000 teams in TFF, nearly half of them will have gained 17 points on you, and that's a big old, a big old gain. So I think you're right, Luke. I think it's a coverage pick more than anything. I think Kane's a good shout tomorrow. Carl, anything to add there for KG?
Yeah, well, I think that's very sensible advice, and I'd go back to all the advice that you've given about jumping on Man City players. You've got I think he's got a lot more transfers than the top people.
Yeah, I agree.
If I was in that, the position he's in is wonderful. I would be thinking, if I was in this position, what do I want to do? Because obviously you want to get up your ranks, but do you want to go for gold and try to win the whole thing? Or do you want to get your best rank and win all your mini leagues? And they could be two slightly different things, because if you want to win the whole thing, you may wish to take a big punt and gamble, because you want a much more like, okay, block Man City is a good way to go. And in his position, I think that's a very sensible thing to do defence-wise. But it comes to variance, and Man City have a bit of a slump. He could go down. It could be, if you're a bit struggling, think about going, say, block Southampton. Hope that they have a good run, just because you're chasing against so many other people, and you need that bit of luck to win the whole thing. Otherwise, all the other advice is fantastic.
I think Man City defence and jump on the large-owned key players in the big games, I think probably the advice we would give. And you'll just naturally move up because of the team you've already got, but because of the transfers you've got in hand as well. And this is why we advise all the way in the first half of the season, hold them back, because this is the time. This is the one.
Yeah. But sort of just adding on that, in terms of the gamble aspect, don't do it yet. Just sort of keep doing what he's doing and what Luke sort of said and what you've just sort of said. But in a month's time, reevaluate, keep your head on, and then look at the big risks if needed.
Agree. Okay, so finally, then we're just going to have a final look at our teams now. So we've talked roughly about our team's now progress and our roughish plan. So, Carl, I've got your team back on screen. So you've got no Man City at all in your team at the moment. So what are your plans for the next week or two? Your specific plans?
My specific plans? Specifically, Salah is going to go, and I don't think I'll have any Liverpool players in for the rest of the season. Same with DCL. I expect they will be going tomorrow. And maybe Grealish and Watkins, undecided on those two at the moment. I'll be bringing in Kevin De Bruyne, probably Stones and Diaz. And, so after sort of talking tonight, and Cresswell, but then that means I probably need to get rid of another defender. All right, I'm going to end up with 5 at the back. And we've sort of seen above that there's so much. You've got so much money, you have too much money in the bank. So I'm really going to have to evaluate. But I'm keeping Rashford and Bruno and bringing Man City players, unknown which ones at the moment, I'm afraid.
Depends I suppose lineups. It all depends who starts as well, don't it, is the thing.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that, Carl. Best of luck with your moves, obviously, and well done on a really good season thus far. Luke, I've now got your team, so you've got 3 Man City in already. What else are you going to do?
I am probably, it's right. The move is going to be dependent on the team sheets tomorrow. So Grealish and Salah are the ones that will potentially move on. Now, Salah is someone who will be coming back. I'm not going to go without Salah for the rest of the season. 100% he'll be back in my team. It's just a matter of when. But if Son and Kane start, then I will be going Salah to Son and another. Balbuena, he's annoying because he keeps not playing, and he was playing, and he should be playing. From all my West Ham mates say he should be playing. So I know as soon as I ship him, he'll be back in. But I could easily go Salah and Balbuena to Stones and Son. Then it's a question of who I go for Grealish, and I might do something there. I mean, I think the reality is I don't need to do too much. So I'm now very happy with 4 of my 5 defenders. Yeah. And I'm literally, my moves now are going to be rotating for 3-for-1s with the front 5. And I might bring in Stones. I'm not overly convinced I think he's probably 60-70% first choice, but he's 1 Rick away from losing it.
You think?
He looks a different player, but John Stones, isn't he? I mean, God.
But even if he gets 4 clean sheets in January and loses his place, he's done his job, and you can move him on to someone else.
I agree. So, yeah, I mean, I think really, yeah. So actually, I mean, the concise answer is Salah is moving on to somebody. I'm probably going to eye up Son as well if he starts. Beyond that, I think I am pretty well set with so I want to get to 4, maybe 5 City. I don't want to go above that personally. But yeah, that's sort of where I'm aiming for.
Looking good. And finally, onto my team. So I'm gutted with Adams. I'm gutted with Adams because I talked about him in my Hub article a couple of months back about how I thought he was a really good pick, and I could never really find the right time to bring him in. And he scored a few goals, and now I brought him in, and then he's haven't done it. But I think my moves. So I've got Salah, Robertson, Reguilon, and Adams. I think are going to be the 4 players I take out. I have got some money in the bank as well. I think I've got about 1.8 million in the bank. I'm going to leave in Tierney at the moment because he's performing really well. I'm going to leave in Zuma because I have to think, because 5-3-2 is no longer a valid formation, which is a problem for me. So I'm going to have to have a think. But basically, I'm going to take out Salah, Robertson, Reguilon, and Adams. Definitely, I may have to take out Watkins, which I don't really want to do, but I might have to anyway. But I'm going to end up with definitely Stones and either Cancelo and Diaz. Potentially, probably De Bruyne, and if I can afford it, because I need to do all the workings out, maybe Aguero for a bit of a punt. That's going to be my moves, and I'm going to move to 5-4-1. So Bamford up front by himself. I'll have a midfield very, very roughly of Fernandes, Son, De Bruyne. I have to think this through. And then, back 5 roughly of Tierney, maybe Zuma, Stones, Cancelo, and Diaz, for example. So that's what I'm moving to for January. But similar to you then, Luke, I've still got the big hitters in terms of Fernandes, Son, De Bruyne, Bamford up front. So yeah, that's kind of roughly what I'm doing, but I need to work it out, and it obviously depends. It's all about lineups. That's the thing with TFF. It's all around the lineups, right? You can only react when you see the lineups. So okay, and we're gonna wrap up then with just a quick look at the top of the Fantasy Football Hub mini league. So this is the £200 members league. In 10th place, we've got Martin Burke, who's having a very good season. We've got Mark Bennett in 9th, Ray Kureshi in 8th. Simon Mass was my nemesis from last season. He pipped me in a mini league by, I think it was 2 points. I don't know if you guys remember when I buggered up on my transfers last season when I went to bring in a load of Liverpool players, but I forgot to press confirm. That cost me like £200 in a mini league because Simon beat me by like 3 points or something. I'll never forget it. Anyway,
I shouldn't laugh, but we've all been there.
We have. We've got a certain Carl Weeks sat in 5th place. Well done, Carl. So you're currently 5th. Really well done. We've got Paul Harrison in 4th, Roger Morgan in 3rd, Mark Rose in 2nd, and Alan Burberry is in top place at the moment. So he's on 843 points. I'm not sure whether these points included today's games, but very well done to all there. Many congratulations. And many thanks to our loyal watchers on YouTube and our listeners for their great questions and comments. We really do appreciate it. So finally, Luke, we're just going to hopefully fall under the 2-hour mark. Luke, where can we get hold of you?
Mostly on Twitter, so right under at FPL Equation on Twitter. I'm on the Hub, but I'm most active on Twitter.
And thank you so much, Luke, for your insight and your advice. Carl, where can people get hold of you?
Yeah, I'm also on the Hub, and you can find me on Twitter as Darkest Jungle.
Superb, and thank you, Carl, for all your slides. So all the data is done by Carl. All your insight and advice as well, Carl. Superb. My Twitter handle is at Fergie222. So this video recording will be on the Fantasy Football Hub, Sky and TFF YouTube channel, with the podcast versions available on all major podcast platforms. If you like what you watched, please press the like button and remember to subscribe to the channel in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. And if you enjoyed your listen, please rate the podcast and leave a comment. Our handles on Twitter, Instagram and TikTok are at FFH_HQ. So please follow and feel free to ask us any questions. Our website is fantasyfootballhub.co.uk, where you'll find everything you need for fantasy football all under one roof. including player comparison tools, the fixture ticker, Opta stats, top player team reveals, and much, much more. And that goes for Telegraph, Sky Fantasy, FPL, Sun Dream Team, and everything else. We've now got a Telegraph transfer planner for Fantasy Football Hub members, which we demoed earlier, and for premium hub members we now have our dedicated Telegraph WhatsApp group. All the links are in the description below to sign up. In the last couple of days we've actually partnered up as well with ffstuff.co.uk, which alongside Fantasy Football Hub have the very best Telegraph fantasy resources you can imagine. Take a look at ffstuff.co.uk. They also have incredible resources for Sky Fantasy, FPL, Sun Dream Team and Fan Team. I also write for the Telegraph every week, so if you go to telegraph.co.uk/fantasy-sports, I give my transfer tips each and every week in the Telegraph, and I also reveal my Telegraph team and plans each week exclusively for Fantasy Football Hub members on the website. Fantasy Football Hub have got you completely covered for everything Telegraph Fantasy Football, and indeed everything Fantasy Football. We will be back hopefully in around a month's time. We do apologise that we couldn't get a pod in over Christmas, but it was absolute bloody chaos, as I'm sure we can all attest to. Didn't have a minute, but we'll be back hopefully next month, where hopefully we will have made some more good progress. Man City will have beaten the next eight teams 5-0. We'll all be flying high. Hopefully it doesn't go wrong, and we'll all be there with Man City losing 1-0, and we're all sat in horrible ranks. We'll be back looking at emerging players and plans for the following month. Thank you all, and good night.